Excuse me, would you like to come over to my place, if you don't mind? In the cold night, with the sound of spring still far away, the woman stood there, wearing only a thin dress, though she had on short black boots, no tights or stockings, and was shivering. The people around her looked at her with eyes that seemed to convey disdain, as if she were something dirty. They either left in a hurry or pretended not to notice her from the beginning and simply passed by. I could have done the same, but I couldn't take my eyes off her. I was drawn to her profile as she bit her trembling lips tightly and stared ahead with a glare. Little did we know at the time that this encounter would completely change me and her, who had given up on believing. My name is Jack. I work part-time at a general merchandise store in a private hospital. I'm now having a drink at my favorite bar after work. My co-worker Catherine is drinking with me. She's a veteran who has been working at the store for a long time. I could say she's like the big mommy of the store. She knows a lot about what's going on in the hospital. It's thanks to her that I can work at that hospital now. And then I forgot to get the change. It's been 3 months since I started this part-time job, and I made such a basic mistake. I guess I'm just no good at anything. With a bottle of beer in my hand and unsure of how many I've had, I'm talking to Catherine. Then she slapped me hard on the back. Get it together. From my perspective, it's only been 3 months. You're like a baby who can't even roll over yet. When I talk to Catherine, who lightly laughs off my failures, I feel lighter. It makes me feel like I can try a little harder, even if it's just me. By the way, Jack, you're supposed to take a last train trip, right? At Catherine's words, I hurriedly checked the time on my smartphone and found that it was well past midnight. The last train nearby is at 11:50 p.m. When I told Catherine that, she said, "Oops," and slapped her forehead. I'm sorry I kept you too. When I drink with you, Jack, I get carried away. No, it's entirely my fault, so it's okay. Besides, my shift tomorrow starts in the afternoon, so I'll kill time at a nearby sing-along bar. Be careful. After paying the bill, I parted ways with Catherine. The cold of the winter night is harsh on my drunk, flushed body. February has just begun. Although the weather forecast suggests that spring is coming earlier, the true essence of spring still feels distant. As I was walking towards the sing-along bar, breathing out white breath, I noticed a woman standing by the side of the road. I stopped in my tracks and stared at her. Amazingly, the woman was standing under the cold sky, wearing only a thin dress, though she had on short black boots, no tights or stockings, and was shivering. The people around her looked at her with eyes that seemed to convey disdain, as if she were something dirty. They either left in a hurry or pretended not to notice her from the beginning and simply passed by. I could have done the same, but I couldn't take my eyes off her. I was drawn to her profile as she bit her trembling lips tightly and stared ahead with a glare. When I mustered up the courage to call out to her, she glared at me. Seeing her up close, her features were a bit childish, but incredibly well proportioned. You could even call her a beautiful woman. Because of that, her glare was even more intense. I flinched and took a step back, and she looked startled. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to glare at you. I was born with intense eyes. Please don't mind it. I cautiously approached her again as she looked down. Her eyes were filled with sadness and resignation. Did you happen to miss the last train? I did too. I was just gonna kill time at that sing-along bar over there, so would you like to join me? Then she looked up at me with wide eyes and stared at me intently. Please, I'd appreciate it. Just as I felt the heat rushing to my face, she smiled. As soon as we arrived at the sing-along bar, I requested a private room and turned on a heater. Then I lent her my jacket. Here, put this over your knees or wear it to warm up. I ordered some soup, so it should be here in a bit. Thank you for everything. Clutching the jacket, she began to shed large tears. As I was taken aback, the waiter who brought the soup came in at the wrong time. No, it's not what it looks like. There's a reason for this. He didn't do anything. It's okay. I'm sorry. The waiter looked at us suspiciously as we desperately tried to make excuses. Although he looked doubtful, the waiter left without saying anything. I'm sorry. I can't help but cry because it's the first time anyone has been so kind to me, she said between sobs. I tilted my head at her words. She wiped her tears with her eyes and straightened up. I hadn't introduced myself yet. My name is Emma. Oh, I'm Jack. Jack. That's a nice name. My heart skipped a beat at her gentle smile. Hey, can I ask why you were out there in the cold, dressed like that? Yes, you might not believe me, but I was working as a nurse at a hospital in the next town. One of the doctors tried to court me, and he was persistent. Since I wasn't interested in him, I turned him down. Then the harassment started. He spread baseless gossip about me to the doctors and nurses, and eventually, I was ostracized by them. To make matters worse, I was unjustly blamed for a medical incident that I had nothing to do with, and I lost my job. I tried to find employment at other medical facilities, but apparently, the rumors had already spread throughout the next town, and no one would hire me. Eventually, I sold my personal belongings to make ends meet, but I couldn't afford the rent for my apartment and had no choice but to leave. I thought I'd come all the way here with nothing but the clothes on my back to look for a job in another town, but I didn't even have enough money for a place to stay, so I was in trouble. She took a deep breath after finishing her story. I offered her some soup, and she said, "Thank you," and slowly swallowed it. It's been a while since I've had a proper meal. I couldn't even afford to buy anything at the supermarket, so I've been eating the grass and flowers around here, but there's not much in the winter. You've been doing that. Do you want to order something else? I hastily handed her the menu, but Emma laughed and declined, saying, "This is more than enough." She declined. That couldn't be true. Under the light, I noticed that her face was pale, and her arms peeking out from her sleeves and legs were terribly thin. Wouldn't it be better for you to go back to your family? I don't have parents. My mother got fed up with my father and left us when I was still a toddler. My father passed away when I was in middle school. He didn't have any known relatives, so there's no one else I can rely on. As I watched Emma kept looking down, my heart broke. I wanted to help her, but I couldn't, because I was someone who couldn't help anyone. As I clenched my fists, she let out a slight smile. "Jack, thank you so much." "Huh? I haven't done anything to be thanked for." "No, you invited me to a warm room, bought some food for me, and even listened to my story. That alone makes me very happy." Emma stood up and returned my jacket to me. "Thank you very much. I will never forget this kindness. I will repay you in any way I can." With that note, she put her hand on the doorknob. Suddenly, I felt that I couldn't let Emma go like this. If I did, it felt like she would be swallowed up and disappear into the darkness of the night. So I grabbed her thin hand. "Emma, why don't you come to my place?" Emma's eyes widened in surprise at my unexpected suggestion. I had said it without thinking, so my mind went blank for a moment. But I managed to come up with a good excuse. A reason to keep Emma here. Words that she couldn't refuse. "I live alone, but I'm terrible at housekeeping and I've been slacking off. If you want to repay me, I'd like you to do the housekeeping for me instead. Of course, you can stay in." Tears started to overflow from Emma's eyes as she stared at me. "Why are you so kind? You're not playing fair, Jack. I can't refuse if you say that." She started crying out loud. Fortunately, this was a sing-along bar with good soundproofing, so her cries wouldn't leak outside. I gently let Emma sit down on the sofa and softly stroked her back until she calmed down. The next day, when I got home after finishing my afternoon shift, Emma greeted me with a welcome home. I involuntarily turned my face away at the sight of her outfit. She was wearing my sweater, but it was so big on her that it looked like a dress. But it wasn't that big, so her thin legs were almost completely exposed. Besides, this situation of a woman wearing my clothes would make any man flustered, wouldn't it? I took a deep breath to calm my frantic heartbeat, feeling like I had seen something I shouldn't have. Is something wrong? Emma tilted her head slightly, seeming to have no idea that I was agonizing. I managed to calm myself down and entered the room, only to find that it was sparkling clean. The clothes I had left unwashed had been laundered and neatly folded, and the piles of trash that I had neglected to take out due to my laziness were gone. The kitchen was spotless, with all the tableware washed. Not only that, but there was a nice smell. "Dinner's ready. Or would you like to take a bath first?" As I was getting excited, thinking that this conversation sounded like a newlywed couple, my stomach growled. Emma smiled brightly. "Let's have dinner first. Please go wash your hands." I washed my hands as I was told and sat down at the dining table. Immediately, She served me freshly cooked pasta, soup, grilled fish, and spinach salad with sesame dressing. Without any hesitation, I began eating, and although it was a bit bland, it was very delicious. In the first place, I had been getting by on frozen dinner meal and instant noodle for the past few months, so this kind of home-cooked meal was something I hadn't had in a long time, and it touched my heart. If it's too bland, please let me know. My sense of taste has been off lately. This is more than enough. But are you okay? What do you mean by off? Everything I eat is tasteless. It might be a taste disorder. It was probably due to a prolonged malnutrition. If you're going to cook from now on, try to eat more red meat, liver, dairy products, seafood, peanuts, and almonds. Don't worry about what I like. She looked at me blankly. You sound just like a doctor. You sure know a lot. Oh, well, I work at a store in the hospital, you know. I just remembered someone with a taste disorder saying something like that. Wow, you have a good memory. That's amazing. No, not at all. I didn't think so, but it made me happy to be praised by her. I think I've got a job. That's what Emma excitedly reported to me about 10 days after we started living together. The final interview today went well, and they told me they're expecting me to be able to hit the ground running. Oh, that's great. We'll have to celebrate when it's official. I was actually happy that Emma had found a job, but that also meant the end of this life of living together with her. It made me feel lonely, but it can't be helped. Once the job offer is finalized, I'll take her to a fancy restaurant or something. With that thought, I looked up restaurants online that Emma would enjoy and picked out a few. A few days later, a small envelope arrived addressed to Emma. The sender was the hospital she said she had interviewed at. Although I had a bad feeling from how light the mail was, I handed it to Emma. She eagerly opened it and checked the contents, and her expression immediately clouded over. I didn't get it. Emma gently placed the mail on the table. I wonder why. They said they were looking forward to having me. She was on the verge of losing heart. That wouldn't do. I told you I work at a hospital store, right? If I asked there, they might hire you. I'm pretty sure they were looking for nurses. Really? But, for a moment, her eyes shone with hope, but she quickly lowered them. I gently placed both hands on her shoulders. It'll be okay. I know someone there. Leave it to me. Even as I said that, my mouth felt dry. It was true that I had a connection, but I didn't know if they would really hire her just because I asked. But I didn't want to see her face darken any further. I wanted Emma to be happy. If you say so, Jack, I'll leave it to you. Relieved to see the brightness return to her face, I made a call to that connection. Emma was successfully able to start working at the hospital where my store was located. Thank you so much, Jack. As she thanked me with a big smile, she kept placing my favorite foods on the table. Clam chowder, roasted sweet potatoes, grilled chicken thighs, salad topped with boiled eggs and tomatoes, and fresh fruits platter. I can't eat all of this though. Oh, you're right. I just got carried away. I ate it all anyway. It was really delicious. Perhaps because she had been able to get proper nutrition and starting to stay with me, her sense of taste seemed to have returned to normal. After satisfying my stomach, tongue, and heart with her cooking, I took a bath. Alone, I thought again about how she would be leaving here soon. I was still lonely after all, but it was her fresh start, so I had to send her off with a smile. Just as I was thinking that, the bathroom door opened. Emma stood there, with just a single bath towel wrapped around her body, startling me. I'll wash your back. My back? No, it's okay. Don't hold back. This is to repay you. Emma set me down and began lathering up the towel with soap, actually starting to wash my back. Occasionally, her arm would touch my back. Her skin would touch mine. Just that was enough to nearly short-circuit my brain. Like I said before, I lost both my mom and dad when I was young, so I never knew the warmth of a family. Living with you, Jack, I feel like I kind of understand that warmth now. I guess you're like a big brother to me. I felt a little miffed at Emma cheerfully scrubbing my back. She didn't see me as a man at all. Well, if she did, we probably couldn't have lived together like this. A mix of emotions swelled in my chest. If I were your brother, you wouldn't do something like this. I said something a bit mean to her, trying to clear those feelings. I thought Emma wouldn't mind, but her hands stopped scrubbing my back. Oh, really? Is that so? When I turned around, our eyes met. Immediately, her face turned bright red. Then, as if just now realizing what she was wearing, she quickly covered her chest area with both arms. Sorry. I'm being weird, aren't I? Family wouldn't do this. Ah. Still blushing, she weakly laughed as she left the bathroom and closed the door. I'm really sorry. After a strained voice, I heard her footsteps moving away. I may have gone a bit too far. I rinsed off the soap she had scrubbed on my back with a shower. Remembering the feeling of Emma's skin on my back, my face turned red too. From the next day, she seemed to start seriously looking for a place to stay. However, she didn't seem to be satisfied with any options. Glaring at the computer and groaning, it's too comfortable here. It's close to the station. There's a cheap supermarket nearby. It's quiet. The neighborhood is safe, and you're here, Jack. Having said that much, she hurriedly covered her mouth. Then she glanced at me. I decided to pretend I hadn't heard anything. I thought that way she might stay here a bit longer. In fact, Emma ended up staying in my room for various reasons. I'm worried you won't eat properly after I leave. You don't know the garbage collection days. At this rate it'll become a hoarder's house. The laundry and dishes will probably be left neglected, and so on, as if trying to justify herself. Then doesn't that mean Emma has a crush on you? Why don't you tell her honestly? When I gave an update at work, Catherine said something like that. I involuntarily blushed, but that heat quickly cooled. But even if she dated someone like me, she wouldn't be happy. You are still on about that. Catherine frowned as she stocked the shelves with products. When she finished, she said, "Here we go," and stood up, putting her hand on the shelf. At that moment, the shelf wobbled slightly. Oh no, this shelf has been shaky lately. Well, this store is pretty old too. Maybe I should ask the director to renovate it. Just as Catherine muttered that, a customer came to the checkout counter. I went back to the said counter. The doctor who carelessly placed a can of soda was an unfamiliar face. His name tag read Johnson. As I was still clumsily operating the POS terminal, he clicked his tongue at me. Hey, come on. Don't irritate me right off the bat on my first day here. A first day, so a new doctor had joined. Thinking that, I remembered what Catherine had told me before. Take your time and do it calmly, and somehow managed to complete the transaction. With a humph, Johnson was about to leave the store when Emma came in, pausing him. She stopped when she saw Johnson. Her face was deathly pale. On the other hand, Johnson looked down at her with a vicious grin, as if licking his lips. So the rumor that you started working at this hospital was true after all, Emma. Dr. Johnson, why are you? Why? I came to pick you up, of course. Johnson tried to take her hand, but Emma quickly pulled away from him. Johnson's forehead bulged with veins. Are you sure you want to show that kind of attitude to me? Or do you want to be unemployed again? Emma bit her lip. Johnson slowly approached Emma and threatened, saying, It's about time to return to me, or else I will divulge a medical incident for which you were responsible. That wasn't me. Say whatever you want. No one's gonna believe you anyway. What I, the great genius, say becomes the truth. Emma started trembling violently. Without even thinking, my feet were already moving. I stepped in between her and him. It's not true that no one will believe what Emma says. I believe her. I heard her gasp behind me. Johnson looked at me suspiciously. Who's this off dude at the store? Even if you believe her, what will you get? You're just a store clerk who barely operates the POS terminal. Trust from someone like you is worthless. That's not true at all. Jack has helped me so much. He saved me. Don't speak ill of him. Emma stepped forward as if to shield me. Johnson must have been upset with her attitude, as he loudly clicked his tongue. You back off. Johnson shoved Emma hard. She stumbled and crashed into a nearby shelf. The shelf tilted significantly. I gasped. That was the shelf Catherine had just said was shaky. The shelf that had leaned backwards seemed to return to its original position for a moment, but then it fell forward. Emma tried to avoid it, but she didn't make it in time, and her leg was pinned under it. Emma. I tried to lift the shelf, but it was too heavy for me to do anything alone. Hey, help me out. I yelled at Johnson, but he just broke out in a cold sweat and didn't move. What's going on? I'll help. Hearing the commotion, Catherine, The nurses, doctors, and patients nearby gathered around. Everyone lifted the shelf together. Emma's leg was bent in a wrong direction. The damage to her skin was severe, and one of the patients grimaced at the gruesome sight. The doctor, who had helped lift the shelf, examined Emma on the spot. "This is bad. We might have no choice but to amputate." "No way. If you do that, Emma won't be able to continue working. She finally just got a job as a nurse. But this is a severe injury. There's a slim chance that we can save her feet." He gave me a troubled look. I immediately averted my gaze from him and looked at Johnson, who was trembling behind me. "You just called yourself a great genius, right? Then can't you save Emma? I'm in internal medicine. There's no way I could do that." We were at a dead end. I unconsciously punched my own thigh with my fist. One of the nurses brought a stretcher. When we put Emma on it, she weakly opened her eyes. "Emma." When I called her name, she reached out her hand towards me as if seeking salvation. I instinctively took her hand, and Emma smiled with a look of relief before losing consciousness again. Seeing that smile, I felt it strongly. She believes in me. If I don't live up to that, I will absolutely regret it. I gripped her hand tightly. "I'll perform the surgery." The one who reacted with a "huh" to the heavy words I spat out was Johnson. A mere store clerk. "What are you?" "Dr. Johnson." He is a doctor too. "A surgeon." Hearing the explanation from the doctor next to me, Johnson gaped at me. "Indeed, if we're to avoid amputation, you're the only one who can perform this operation. Please." I nodded without saying a word, and then I began preparing for surgery. Emma woke up in the evening after I finished the surgery. She looked at me and expressed her deep appreciation as I rushed to her hospital room. "The nurse told me you performed the surgery. Thank you so much." The smile she showed me as she raised her head touched my heart. "But well, Jack, you were a doctor, huh?" "Yay, about that. I'm sorry for deceiving you." As I apologized, feeling awkward, Emma shook her head slightly. "I knew. When I was cleaning your room, there were a lot of medical journals. The covers were worn out, so I could tell you had used them a lot. I thought you must have been seriously dedicated to your job as a doctor." I couldn't help but shed tears at her kindness and knowing, but quietly keeping it to herself. She reached out and took my hand as I did so. "Can I ask why you quit practicing medicine?" I nodded once and sniffled. Then I began to talk about my huge blunder. I used to work at this hospital. I had a reputation as a genius surgeon for successfully performing even the most difficult surgeries. I was proud of that reputation. Then one day, my mother fell. The surgery to cure her illness required extremely advanced skills. I was the only one in this hospital who had them. So I volunteered to perform my mother's surgery. "Mom, I promise I'll cure you." "Yes, I believe in you, Jack." I said that to my mother before she fell asleep from the anesthesia. But I failed. I performed resuscitation on my mother, whose heart had stopped during surgery, but to no avail. She passed away without ever waking up. Outside the operating room I stumbled out of, it was pitch black. I thought it matched the current state of my heart. I collapsed there and cried. As I pounded the floor, I hurled insults at myself. What was that about? "I promise I'll cure you"? I was just a huge fool who got conceited over my reputation as a genius surgeon. I'm the worst kind of person who couldn't even save my mother, who believed in me. I don't deserve to practice medicine any longer, I thought. After my mother's funeral, I cut off all communications and didn't come out of my shell. I kept myself in my room. About a week later, my father, the hospital director, came to my door. "Come out. How long do you plan to keep this up? Doing this won't bring your mother back." Feeling miserable at my strict father's voice, I threw medical journals at the door. The book hit the door with a loud noise, bending several pages as it fell to the floor. "I don't deserve to be a doctor. Just leave me alone." I heard my father let out an exaggerated sigh. "Enough already. Get out. I don't want to keep someone who won't work in my house." I felt like a weight had fallen on my heart. I slowly gathered my things and left the house. But with nowhere to go, I walked, thinking I would spend the night at a sing-alone bar for the time being. On the way, I ran into Catherine. "Jack, is that you? I heard you haven't been coming to work lately. Are you okay? And what's with that luggage?" At the bar Catherine took me to, I revealed that I had been kicked out by my father. "Catherine, who had been listening to my story with a serious face, made a certain suggestion. "Then why don't you work at the store where I am? I'll talk to your father, the director, about it. He can't ignore what I say, you know." I replied to Catherine, who had a confident smile. "Please, I'd appreciate it," while holding back the overflowing tears. Just as I finished talking, Catherine came in. "Oh, you're awake. That's good." After giving Emma a gentle smile, Catherine's face turned serious and she said, "You know what, Jack? I've been thinking. You are fired from your part-time job. You're totally useless." "What?" Hearing that out of the blue, I stared at Catherine with wide eyes. Emma also let out a pained voice, saying, "How could you?" But I could understand, since there were many things that came to mind. Still, it was definitely disheartening. I dropped my shoulders. I could feel Emma's hand gripping mine tightly. "How could you? Why, Catherine? Jack was working hard, wasn't he? But you see, this kid just can't seem to learn how to operate the POS terminal no matter how much time passes, even though he has the skills to cleanly treat your leg. In other words, Jack, you can't make the most of your talents as a store clerk, but as a doctor, that's your true calling." I involuntarily looked up. Catherine was looking at me with eyes full of the same affection my mother had shown me when she was alive. Before I knew it, hot tears spilled from my eyes. "Isn't that right, Director?" Catherine glanced towards the hallway. Then my father appeared with a frown on his face. I hurriedly wiped my tears. My father quietly looked at Emma's leg, then glared at me. I braced myself for what he would say. "The surgery you performed on her was impressive. If she goes through rehabilitation, she should be able to walk normally again. As Catherine says, return to practice medicine, Jack. Your mother would surely wish for it." His voice was as strict as ever, but I could sense that he trusted me from the way he spoke. Even when I had shut myself in, my father must have felt the same way. Realizing that just now, tears started flowing again from my eyes that I thought I had stopped. My tear ducts seemed to have completely loosened up. Emma gently stroked my hand again. "Look at how many people believe in you, Jack. That's a truly happy thing." Instead of being able to speak to sobs, I nodded over and over. My father said, "Geez, what a crybaby," in an exasperated tone, but he still patted my head. "Well then, Director, shall we excuse ourselves? Let's leave the rest to the young ones." Catherine winked at us, then left the hospital room with my father. After the door closed with a soft thud, silence enveloped us. Seeing that I had completely stopped crying, Emma smiled. "I've received more kindness from you than I could ever repay, Jack. For this surgery, for taking me in, for believing my story." I tilted my head at her last words, and a dark shadow fell over her face. Until now, no one had ever believed what I said. I think it's partly because of my intense eyes. I'm sure if I had a family, it wouldn't have been like that. Family believes in you no matter what, right? But I didn't have that family. So I was happy that you believed me, Jack. When you said you believed me in front of Dr. Johnson, I felt like I was gonna cry. I squeezed her hand back. "I may not be your family, but I believe in you." Emma looked up at me, and tears quickly welled up in her eyes. They overflowed and ran down her flushed cheeks. "I want to become your family, Jack. Not as your sister, but as your wife. This time, I want to support you and believe in you. This isn't nearly enough to repay your kindness, but that's more than enough. If you're by my side, I couldn't be any happier." I embraced Emma as she sobbed. She clung to me, wrapped her arms around my back, and cried a lot in my arms. I started working at the hospital as a surgeon again. Perhaps because word had spread about my successful surgery on Emma, the evaluation of me as a genius surgeon returned. But I won't let it go to my head anymore. I'll just do my very best for the patients who come to me for help. If they're saved, it's not thanks to me, but simply because they believed in me. After finishing another surgery today, I headed to the hospital store. I thought I'd buy Emma some candies since she'd been working hard at her rehabilitation. "Welcome, Jack." Catherine greeted me. I was captivated by how smoothly and efficiently she handled the transaction. "You know, I heard Dr. Johnson was forced to resign. They said they don't need a doctor who can act in an emergency, and the power harassment and sexual harassment he subjected Emma to at his previous hospital were proven." Now that she mentioned it, I remembered my father had gone to see Emma and asked her some things. A feeling of gratitude for my father, who had taken action for us, welled up inside me. I took the items I had purchased and bowed my head to Catherine. Catherine, thank you again for letting me work here. If you hadn't taken me in back then, I would have remained a mess. No, I only did what I was asked to do. When I widened my eyes, wondering what she meant, Catherine's expression softened. Your mother asked me to take care of you. She seemed to understand how difficult her surgery would be. She said, that boy is a kind and very skilled son that I'm proud of. I believe in his abilities. So if he fails, it will only be because I was unlucky. I remembered my mother facing me at the end and saying, I believe in you. Suddenly, tears started overflowing. Oh dear, this kid, geez. You're going to see him now, right? Pull yourself together, she scolded. Spurred by her reprimand, I rubbed my eyes hard and wiped away the tears. Thank you so much, truly. I thanked her again and left the store. I went to Emma's hospital room and gave her the pudding I had bought at the store. Thank you. I just finished rehab, so this makes me happy. She beamed, but then tilted her head as she looked at me. Did you cry, do you? Oh, you could tell. Yeah, your eyes are puffy. But I can also tell they were happy tears. You look like a weight has been lifted off you. Embarrassed that she had noticed, I scratched my cheek. She held out a spoonful of pudding in front of me. Here, say ah. It's okay. I bought it for you, Emma. You know, I want to share my happiness with my family too. My heart raced at the sight of her white teeth as I took the spoon in my mouth and ate the pudding. Smiling, she ate some pudding with the same spoon. There's so much I want to do once I finish rehab. First is cleaning the room. You definitely haven't been doing it, have you, Jack? I do, sometimes. Suspicious. Emma gave me a steady look as I glanced away. It might seem like she's glaring, but I know that's not the case. Also, I want a rematch at washing your back. I ran off in the middle of it last time. Siblings might not do it, but it wouldn't be weird for a married couple, right? When she said that, looking up at me with feverish eyes, my face instantly flushed. I want to take you somewhere once your rehab is over, Emma. I raised my voice a little, trying to change the subject. It seemed to work, as her interest shifted there. Huh? Where? To visit my mom's grave. I want to go tell her that I'm marrying you. Oh, I wanted to visit your mom's grave too, Jack. Here, I guess we're on the same wavelength. She smiled bashfully, looking happy. My cheeks naturally relaxed at her cuteness. I made a terrible mistake in the past, and I lost confidence in myself. However, when you fall into such emotional distress, I want you to take a good look around you. If you do, you'll realize that even if you make such a mistake, you have family and friends who believe in you. That's an incredibly happy and blessed thing. So I want you to believe in yourself, with such family and friends by your side.